Welcome to Brand Formula, a new podcast focused on the marketing and brands at play in Formula One today. I'm your host, Mordecai, and my co host is Elissa Margulis. Say hi, Elissa.
Hello, good to see you.
And you. Between us, we have 30 years of marketing experience across agencies, in house at brands, digital platforms, content studios, and more. We're also big F1 fans. Elissa was raised on F1 from childhood, and I am a Drive to Survive COVID convert. Each week, we will bring to you our takes on the brands around F1, the teams, and the drivers themselves. We'll analyze the advertising and marketing moves being made, the audience as it continues to evolve across markets, and look at white spaces we think need to be covered. Who is seeing an ROI and who's DNF'd? So let's talk the brand formulas shaping F1 today. Welcome to episode 4. Thank you for listening, and please support us by liking, subscribing, and following us and all of that good stuff. So, welcome to Brand Formula. We are back. It is episode 4, and we are vicariously having the pleasure to be at your favorite race in real life, the dream, really. So, how was it spending the weekend in Suzuka?
I was dreaming about being there. Maybe this is our goal next year in Japan, and we are going to be there. But I was traveling, so I had to watch a replay of the race on my phone while I was boarding the plane, which was highly, highly stressful. However, what I loved most about it, and it was a very, very early flight, is that people in the airport, you could tell who were Formula One fans. And it was kind of nice that we're all having this collective moment of watching the race and experiencing it. And I audibly gasped when there was Ollie's big crash. So it definitely wasn't maybe the most calming thing to watch before getting on an airplane.
No, and I hadn't even put that together for you because I was so over concerned on the fact that I didn't get to see Charles and George cross the line, directors of the television broadcast. Um,
I feel like we missed half of what was going on in that race, to be honest. So,
mhm.
whatever the comment box is for F1 race direction, I'm dropping it in there. Please give us more. We don't just want to see what's happening at the front. We don't want to see the same story every week. That's also not how you build connection to a sport. That's why people love Drive to Survive. It gives you this more broad view and it goes deeper into stories across different aspects of Formula One. And so to have the broadcast be this kind of narrow view is actually just feels a little bit disappointing for people like us that are there because we are true fans.
Yeah. Well, it's why we are second screening, not in the Apple TV way, but in the social way. Because
Exactly.
one of the reasons, I enjoy Japan so much as well is the creativity and the passion and the complete commitment of the Japanese fans. And frankly, others who are traveling in to attend are there also to get their full fandom in. And I don't care how typical it is, but I did think that Macarena wing helmet was a real highlight. And the Little Me's, those 3 young women
Oh,
who debuted, with Little Max, Little Lando, Little Charles. I mean, F1 really did milk them across social this year, which was smart, and also revealed a lot more that they were girls, which I don't think was made as clear last year when they were just sort of in the front of the crowd with that. But they are absolutely adorable, and they had updated outfits to be, Lando's number one, and that kind of thing was really cute.
yeah. My whole social feed was just overtaken by the fan experience in Japan, which is obviously as a country, it is a massive fandom and has been for quite some time, historic track. So I just love how they embrace it. And it's so interesting just to see how that local experience shifts race to race, which is, I think, one of the
hmm
reasons that it makes Japan so special because they're so invested in it. They've been so invested in it for so long.
Yeah. It was also nice to see on social. It seems like because of the long break that we're now going into, which was unexpected, and the week off before, it seems like a lot of the drivers are really spending time in Japan. I saw before hopping on today that like Ali Bierman was hopping on a bullet train. And it just seems like they're really getting to enjoy Japan for a little bit wherever they are, because Suzuka's not in like the heart of Tokyo. So they're already seeing more of Japan than just Tokyo in that. And
Yeah.
it was just cute, all the things that they were doing around it. And it was an important race because of that unexpected spring break, because of the war happening. Because we really teed up into these new regs. And, we have said, I think, in every episode, all three before this particular moment, that, we are not here to be your technical experts or otherwise, but, you know, the regs are coming into play. F1 is strategy as a sport. I lately think it has a little bit of software as a sport to be
Very true.
considered. And the extra dev time, and I think a lot of the collective meetings with the FIA and the drivers and the teams will be really needed. And these affect the brand propositions that are at play on the Formula One grid. So we wanted today to talk about OEMs and IPs, um, which are different subject matters to a lot of degrees. But, just to be clear, when we talk about OEMs, because I always hate it when people abbreviate things in industry circles and just think you're either on the train or not. So no need to Google, but OEMs are original equipment manufacturers. So they're your big car companies that you see. It's just a industry term to showcase what that's all about. And IP, we're just talking about intellectual property. I think that one's a little bit more known as it goes. But when it comes to OEMs on the grid in F1, it is an important territory. It affects the brands overall. These are not tiny companies, these are gigantic global enterprises. It's the reason we have 22 cars on the grid this year. We have the update to Audi, we have Cadillac joining the grid. And these new regulations were really to consumer commercialize what happens on the F1 track a little bit. And I'm not saying that's the only reason, but we're here for brand and consumer value. That's what we're talking about on our podcast. And that is a player here when we're discussing this. The new regulations, they are to showcase these new to market and soon to market technologies and really give an opportunity for OEMs to demonstrate what could be in your driveway, how aspirational you can be, high performance, and have a sustainable tech car. They offer all of the components, your engine, your fuel, and your software, which is so fundamental these days. So a bit of the quick logistics of this, because we don't want to be gearheads, but what these new regs did is that they moved to a 50-50 split of internal combustion and electric motor and battery. There, we moved from the MGU-H, which could not be in your driveway, to the MGU-K, which is more the electric motor era, which can be there. It also can do 470 horsepower all on its own. And then we have the sustainable fuels. So we're now at 100% sustainable fuels in the new regs. And this really is all fuels that are created from carbon capture or municipal waste, which is so important for all of these OEMs to showcase that they can do this without needing to redesign the car. We have a bunch of modes that come through this, but really the marketing has been this efficiency through software that allows all of these different modes, which is somewhat of a controversy modes that we'll talk about in this, but it really was about bringing that to the future. How do we create these efficiencies? And there were two OEMs which we want to focus on today because we were just in Japan. And those are Honda and Toyota, who have two different stories of the last week and also different stories in being an F1 overall. So, without further ado, we will rip the plaster in the UK or band aid in the US off. And let's talk about Honda and Aston Martin, which has been a bit of a unfortunate case study masterclass in brand position because that situation is just abysmal. Um, Alyssa, like, where are we at with this?
It not only has it been abysmal, but I have to say, as someone that will be getting a new car at some point in the next year, and I would love to wear the badge of F1 honor in my car that sits in my driveway. I do have vanity plates on my car, lights out. So to have those on an actual manufacturer of F1 would be amazing. But after all of this insanity with Honda, I think I'm counting them out as the one that will be sitting in my driveway. And it's interesting to think about that from a consumer perspective and from the history of Honda being in Formula One, because it's been a little bit chaotic and it kind of proves that things can change really, really fast for you. And you have to, as a brand, be prepared for both ends of the story. So from 2015 to 2017, which was the McLaren era of Honda, things were actually really horrible from a commercial perspective. Honda committed over $375 million across 3 years in both cash and also engines, and they got nothing but negative media back. They got Fernando Alonso complaining nonstop on the radio that the engine was no better than a GP2. And that means not worthy of Formula One for those that are maybe new to the F1 sports. Analysts actually estimate that the cost to repair the brand perception to Honda after that partnership was over 200 million. So they basically paid to get worse from a brand perspective. And by 2017, brands wouldn't even consider them as an engine partner. And then they really
Mhm.
turned it around and they won 4 consecutive drivers' championships with a Honda engine. Obviously, got a ton of earned media from being a Red Bull partner, for Max winning all of those championships back to back, an estimated 120 to 150 million per year in brand exposure. And that wasn't even them being a title sponsor. It was only being a technical supplier. So they really didn't buy that attention, they earned it. And I love that. That's a really amazing arc from a brand turnaround. So when they came back with Aston Martin, it has just been sad to watch. It's been an actual nightmare. But I think about it from a leadership perspective and also a technical perspective. Because when they left F1, they also exited with a lot of their engineering teams. They went to go work on other projects, other parts of Honda. They left totally. So they had to really rebuild from the ground up for 2026. At the same time, they're rebuilding a brand. They're building technical engines under completely new regulations. They're not really able to bring any of that past performance into what's coming. So I don't know if where they're at now is a brand leadership problem, is it an engineering problem, is a little bit of both.
It's very confusing to watch and seems to be a part of the Aston Martin problem overall, which is this thinking of if you have, you know, you say 4 drivers champions. I know we both would argue 3, and maybe there's a side conversation to the 4th, but I
We'll
was
put it
willing
in
to give
the show
Max a 5th,
notes.
you know what yeah, exactly. But, we both, really support our 8-time world champion of Lewis Hamilton,
Yes, we
over
do.
here on the pod. So, it is just interesting how Aston has made these decisions that if something worked before, it must continue to work, and just like anything in technology that we're looking at, the evolution is fast and rapid. I mean, we spoke about AI on the grid because even the FIA can't contain it. And so to think in any way that car manufacturers are going to be the same, I mean, anyone in car manufacturing also knows it's a 3 to 5 year journey. So when you're in this, I see them say it on Sky a lot, and I'm not a expert when it comes to F1 cars, but I have worked at an OEM for several years. And, when you end up with something that in the actual practical use isn't working, that road to change is not quick.
No.
Um, there's conversations of, when will this change in how it goes? And, what we're looking at here is in consumer value, for Honda. F1 success is worth roughly 3 to 5% in brand premium. And that's for any OEM on the grid. That's what people are looking at. When we look at what you were talking about with Red Bull, that's an estimated 1.2 billion in brand value out of that. When we look at the McLaren failure, you touched on it, it's 400 to 600 million in brand equity was wiped out in that. So when we're looking at the larger marketing budgets and the commitments that are being done, and there's multiple teams involved in this isn't just obviously a marketing partnership, this is a product side of things. And as you mentioned, it's a whole other part of the business that has to open up shop to bring it forward. But it is this area of massive reward, massive risk. And so in Aston's case, we are heading to the fourth race in 5 weeks ahead, and they have two drivers. So that means they could have completed 6 races. And they have completed one. And the issue is, for those that are unfamiliar, is they're actually affecting the drivers cannot drive the car because of the massive vibrations. And it's a question, though, and it's becoming a question in terms of how people are seeing it from a consumer point of view. But is it an engine issue, which falls on Honda, or is it a chassis issue, which falls on Aston? And this becomes a legal issue as well, because this partnership, sponsorship, title, sponsorship setup, any of these, the usual trigger point is if it's 2% slower than pole. And I don't have all of the data, but knowing that they haven't even started some races and they've had to quit them
It's
and
much
where they've
higher than
placed,
that.
if it hasn't been triggered, we don't, that's crazy. So what's Papa Stroll gonna do?
We all know Papa Stroll is not maybe going to make the best decision for the team. He will throw money and he will throw tantrums. And where that lands, unclear. But I cannot imagine either he's taking a loss and saying, we're going to make it through and we have to figure it out for 2027, or there's going to be a massive shift now, which probably keeps them down at the back for this entire season. And I don't know if that's going to be a place that he's going to be comfortable with. So, Aston to me is just a brand that has more than engine issues. It has also brand equity issues. What does it even stand for if it can't get through races? It doesn't have two drivers that you really want to be invested in. So we love ourselves some Alonso, but when he can't even finish a race, you can't exactly root for him.
No, and it's Papa Alonso as well, as of this weekend, because he became a father. But let's get into these numbers in terms of the brand dilution that Aston Martin has had. It is a cautionary tale of how racing failures really bleed into corporate finances. So what we're talking about when we say that it's been a mess and, we're ripping off the Band-Aid, if you look at their 2025 reporting, they saw a decrease of 21% in revenue. That's from 1.58 billion to 1.25. They had another profit warning, their fifth profit warning in 18 months, just before the 2026 season. And they've tried to sort of put some plasters of their own into this by, selling the team's naming rights for 50 million to sort of bridge the gap, just a lot of like moving money to try and keep things going. But their average selling price has dropped 15%. So if you wanted that Aston Martin for 245K British pounds, which is a popular area they're sold, to 209 is what you're looking at. And it's just very dangerous for them as a brand, because what Honda is investing, the cost cap allows for a $130 million investment, which is from a dedicated factory to the R&D budget for a power unit. And with this vibration issues and so on that you see from this investment, and then the brand dilution and actual financial impact that this is having, it really highlights the trust proxy issue of these relationships. And it's also, a real issue for the FIA to be looking at, because this is but one example, but they went really far with these regulations that we were talking about. And we don't correlate the Honda Aston Martin issue to just the regulations in this, but it is the overarching of what happens when so much brand equity is at play. And you're also trying to tell more of a consumer story, and the cars are becoming a bit dangerous out there. Was 50-50 too much? Did we need to be so consumer ready in our tech?
And where did the regulations come from? If you have to also look at the consumer side of it, because they were made partly to make racing more exciting. And I put that in quotation marks because for whom? There has been this massive explosion in viewership, massive explosion in fandom, and you have to keep people interested. I think this is something that you see in a lot of sports, baseball, basketball. I was about to say soccer, so sorry, football, but mass sports tend to look at technology and shifts in regulation as a way to sometimes not protect the players and the teams, but to protect the money and to make more of it because they want to make it more interesting, more exciting, more ways for people to have opinions on it, get involved in it, create social ecosystems around it, and bring brand money in. And so there's something to me, the next 4 weeks of the FIA thinking about where do we go with these regulations is also where is that balance between doing it for the sport, doing it for the protection of the drivers, and doing it for the commercialization? Because all three can be true and all three can be right, but the mix of them has to be fair. And putting drivers at risk in order to make something more fun and viewable to watch is not okay.
Yes. And for Aston, they're trying to tell the story of performance. But so Honda is putting that forward, but they had a difficult time. They had to change their comms throughout their time in Japan to be much more like we're one team. And what we see from Aston and with Honda is they had to change from that performance sort of high, look at us, we're here, and just be much more like we have transparency. We're here to show that we're about the team because they didn't have the performance narrative, which is what's going to give you that 3 to 5% of brand positioning uptick that we're talking about. And then you go to the other side of the coin and you have Toyota with Haas. And they are there to demonstrate, yes, performance a little bit. I'm not going to say it's not there, but they're much more focused on reliability and being the engineers of the people. Haas is just look at their pit wall. They're a tinier team. They're the classic underdog story. It's lots of issues. And they probably had the most controversial risk narrative around their weekend at the end of it, but Toyota did come out strong. I mean, they're a safety first brand and they had the horrific crash of Ollie Bierman, and the whole complaint really that I saw, majority was immediately to the regulations. It actually didn't go after Toyota.
Not at all. I mean, it really had to do with the fact that you had two cars going at such dramatically different speeds that something bad was going to happen just with a small human choice. And that is definitely something to look at. We cannot be going backwards in terms of driver safety. We need to be going forwards. And that was just so scary to see. And Toyota as the title partner of Haas, they're getting unfortunately earned media for all of the wrong reasons. And that's never never great to see. But I do like that Haas has gone performance with their title sponsorship because yes, every team needs money and they're going to take money from a title sponsor that gives them the most. But seeing it shift from MoneyGram, which was clearly literally about money, to being about performance and safety, development, manufacturing, drivers, I love that. I think that there is more opportunity then for also true fans and true car people to become Haas fans. They do run on a Ferrari power unit, so that's kind of an interesting dichotomy between who actually powers them and who builds them. So Toyota's really bringing the capability of the team to move up in the pack in a more sustainable way while Ferrari's actually powering the car. So I think from a brand perspective, that's something just to think about for your maybe not everyday Formula One fans that might get confused between Toyota as the named title sponsor of the Haas team powered by a Ferrari unit. But to
Mhm.
your point about OEMs, you can't necessarily buy a Ferrari as easy as you can buy a Toyota. So when you think about what brand lift you're getting, Toyota has much more opportunity for your everyday consumer to be bought in than a Ferrari.
Yeah. And just as a side note for those not familiar with F1 to the great degree we already are, and there are those eons ahead of us with their knowledge. But it's also important to note that a lot of this crisscrosses a lot. Like Bierman is actually a Ferrari driver as far as anyone is concerned, because he came up through the academy. His first F1 experience was in a Ferrari and he performed quite well. And he's still in that young drivers program sort of coming up. He is expected to sit in a Ferrari after this time with Haas. And you see a lot of that crisscross all around the grid. So, what's really important in understanding when we talk about these brand positions is that we're talking about who's on the car, who is titled more, because you're going to see the Mercedes power unit is in multiple cars, but Mercedes is not the OEM that we're going to speak of with all of the different cars that are out there that have them, whether they like it or not. We see that with McLaren having their hard time. But if you build it, they eventually have to learn it. So we did see that Toyota had, this time with Haas. They are building up a nice story. Before the crash, Bierman was number 5 in the drivers' championship, which for a Haas is a comeback kid story like no other. But we also had some fun on the IP side, which was the other thing we wanted to talk about today, which was we had the King of the Munsters on Haas's livery. What did you think of Godzilla and the livery, even though we have said that we do not really understand liveries and the fuss?
I truly still don't. I loved all of the creativity around these liveries. I will say there's some beautiful, beautiful marketing moments and art, and I love that part of it. So I'll put that to one side. The other side is I just don't get why we have to do this every race. But anyway, I thought the Haas and Godzilla partnership was kind of great. It's exactly what we were talking about last week about brand building. Excuse me, about community. It wasn't a one off. It was content. It wasn't just for show. It has multiple touch points. It's different races. It's going to be tied to the actual launch of the movie, which coincides with the Austin Grand Prix. So I really thought it was so smart, and whoever was sitting in that room to make these marketing decisions and to brainstorm this took, maybe they're listening to our podcast. Who knows? Though I'm sure this was done a year ago, but they did all the things that we want to be done from a brand formula, which was to do it in a way that felt right for the fans, to bring two worlds together. So as F1 gains all of these new fans, and especially as F1 gets younger, this is such a smart relationship because you're building historical fans of the Godzilla and then also bringing in new with Gen Z. So I'm excited to see what happens next.
Yeah, it was really exciting. And we will be, we have 4 weeks of content coming your way. So we'll be talking a lot about IP. And, I can't guarantee it, but Lego does a pretty good job. And I think you'll see us talking about Lego a lot more over the next few weeks, especially en route to Miami. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed for another driver
It's got to
derby sort
happen.
of. Oh, I would love it. But when we see that what kind of happens with IP on the grid and the continued volume of conversations, we saw the Haas Godzilla, the whatever the wolf with Y3 was, and I am a Yoji Yamamoto like stan, so I was really just
You
confused.
won't be buying it though, to be clear.
You know, I
This was
won't.
not it.
I will not. I will not. I didn't need it in my life. But I also really struggled with this weekend and I'm curious actually if it came up on the broadcast. I think you had to watch on F1 TV because you were traveling, but on Sky, I they're showing the movie and it's gonna be available on Sky Cinema, so it was an overload, and I don't know if it overloaded on F1 TV, but the Super Mario Galaxy movie, which is very important to mention, is an animated film. And they had the voiceover actors, which are all names and people that one would recognize, but they had them all over the Sky coverage, from Jack Black doing the opening to they were on the grid. Jack Black did the checkered flag, and they were on the grid walk. They even had a whole end of the grid interview time right before the anthems. And they had nothing to really say except to bounce around as if they were Mario characters. Now, the issue here is that there has been in what, the last month, so much earned media from Mario because everyone says driving these cars and everyone being the drivers is saying that it's like what is that, a mushroom boost from Mario, but there has been social like AI content made around this, and it's been everywhere that this is basically the new regulations that we have just talked about the horrors of. But on the flip side, that these like this yo-yo, passing and going by everyone like that, that these are, it's basically like playing Mario Kart, and we have actual Mario IP on the grid, and all we're doing is looking at Gen X and millennial actors talk about how cool it is to be in Japan, but not really talk about Mario. And I'm just going to also add, before we go deeper into this, that Anya Taylor-Joy is also a huge F1 fan. I mean, she is a big Lewis supporter. It seems that they are friends as well, but she was at least 5 on grid last year that she was in attendance for. It seems that she goes whenever she can, and they couldn't ask her anything beyond how cool is it that you have a movie coming out? And she's so insightful and so interesting. They asked her only, who would you give a mushroom boost to? But they didn't even really leverage this, even when Oscar Piastri in the cool down room after coming in second said, I finally understand the Mario reference.
It was so disappointing as I'd say as a fan of social content for Formula One and also as a marketer, because, okay, number one, uh, who media trained these actors? Who briefed them? I was highly confused that there was no understanding, seemingly, of what had been going on, for one. And for two, Mario Kart is not an official partner with F1. They are getting all this earned media, all this conversation that's happening. And it doesn't seem like they tried to pivot their marketing plan to try to insert themselves in a really natural, organic way, which, by the way, they could have started doing weeks ago and then used Japan as this really big moment. And so I, I was just wondering if that is maybe it's a highly matrixed organization and they couldn't get it together to get approval to jump on this and to make something about it. But if you're going to be anywhere associated with Formula One, you have to deeply understand that it is also such a fan driven and moment driven sport. Things happen super fast, not just on the track, but the conversations that happen around them. And so I would have loved to see Mario Kart insert themselves in more natural ways, maybe do events, pop ups, bring that community together. They could have partnered with some drivers really quick. I'm sure they love to get a little bit of extra money, do a fan event. I'm hoping something else happens because this was a real letdown.
I just really, I'd seen Crofty was around the paddock at a certain point in the pre Grand Prix coverage, and he went into a little fight with one of those blow up Godzillas, and he was fighting it, just for play. And I was just thinking, like, just go to the shop. And someone must have shown up to the Japan Grand Prix as a Mario character also. Like, I just can't believe that they wouldn't, because that's just Japan. And just bring a couple of inflatables, and that's your moment, is having drivers around Mario characters. All of the characters in the movie could have just been put in a plushie and held up by a driver, and it would have made organic sense to what has been going on this season. And it was just such a missed opportunity, just such a waste of money. I think they had 6 actors there in total. And again, no robust conversation, and we're not asking everyone to be experts, but to be so tone deaf to not have been walked through, like you said, those simple media bullets of, by the way, there's the mushroom boost happening. Everyone thinks this is like Mario. Maybe you can talk about, well, will a car jump another car? Joke about it. Like, I don't know. I'm not here to write their press bullets, and the moment has passed us. But it was very unfortunate. And it goes into the larger, and this is just a question that I've had while we've been talking around these issues is, where is the white space? We talked about it with Disney. Disney to me, feels like the scraps being picked up. But then you look at things like another movie coming in, and you're wondering, what are they being offered in terms of a partnership, and the knowledge that brand partnerships is not just A plus B equals a high five, good job, we got, 1% of our needle moved. These are things that can really create a dedicated fan base, can make people's perception of you really rise at rates much more than a lot of other advertisements. So to see someone come on grid and miss their moment that was teed up for them is just so unfortunate.
Yeah, and if Godzilla hadn't launched with Haas this weekend, maybe it wouldn't give you so much obvious fail energy, but you had 2 movies simultaneously on the grid, and one is building a world, one is building a true partnership, and one is, I don't know what they're doing, but it wasn't it.
Yeah. Um, and I will say, we'll talk about it because it's just so great. But, I'd always go back to when the Lego sort of driver derby happened. So they built Lego car. If you've been living under an F1 rock, or you only listen to us for marketing, um, they had all of the drivers drive Lego cars. So it took months to build these cars of individual Lego pieces. And they did what drivers do. They crashed into each other. They
Legos
had so
flying.
much Legos flying everywhere, and the first response from people in media was, "Oh, no, they're breaking the cars," and then people went, "But that's what they're supposed to do." And it's that embracing of IP with sport. I mean, they were having the time of their lives. It was just rise, rise, rise of brand partnership IP when watching it. No one has to be worried of, "Oh, will we never be able to rebuild the car again?" Move along. It
Move along, move along.
Complete
And
slam
one of the
dunk.
biggest lessons in brand partnerships is to be malleable, is to be able to pivot and to be able to create something that isn't just built in a deck. If you are just executing the bullet points that you put in your kickoff call, you're probably not leveraging a partnership to its truest potential. And that's really the base of branded entertainment, is inserting a brand into entertainment, into IP, into like-minded spaces in a way that doesn't feel like it doesn't belong.
Mhm. And hopefully, Aston Martin can start looking at this and to figure out what they need to change, because it seems that they are looking at old results for new ideas. And you need to stay much more current with things, much more malleable, as you are saying. So, we will be surprising you next week with a deep dive around a topic to be determined. But that's all for episode 4, but the beginning of a much needed time to talk about these regulations. But really, the point here is that you need to be maximizing your presence in all your partnerships and really getting the most of it as you go. So remember that marketing isn't about whose voice is loudest, but whose voice you'll remember. We look forward to continuing to talk about marketing and F1 with all of you, who's seeing an ROI and who's DNF'd in Formula One. Please like, subscribe, and do all the following. We're building up our channels. We're being simple, earned organic over here, but your support would mean the world. So goodbye for now and lights out.
Lights out.